So I don't think you had any questions on the count if, but I've kind of filled them in here. It is important that you have named your ranges, and it doesn't tell you what to use for range names, so you can kind of make up your own names. But for the operator IDs, I called that range operator. For this little operator table, I called it op table. For the status column, I just called it status. And for the time spent column, I just called it time. And that's actually kind of important when you're creating these. So you'll notice I've got a count if here. It's looking at everything in the status column and it's counting up the actives. And then below that, I have basically the same thing, but it's counting up the closed. And then over here, I've got a count if, and it's looking in the operator column. And for this one, it's counting the number ones. And then for this one, it's counting the number twos, okay, and so on. So for the total time, we are going to be using a sum if. And I think it's easiest, especially when you're first learning, if you go in and you use the dialog box. Now, most of these functions are in the statistical group except for sum if. Sum if is a math and trig function. So we're going to find sum if and select it. And so for the criteria that we want, we are going to look at the IDs. So we know the criteria is going to be the ID. And the range for that criteria is in my operator column. And then the range of values that I actually want it to look at and add is in my time column. Okay, so it's going to look up this value over in this column, and if they match, then it's going to add up the time. So it'll add this one and this one. It's going to come down here, add in that value, that value, that value. So pretty much every time it hits a 1, okay, over in this column, it's going to come over here and grab the time and add that to my total. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Okay, and because I've got range names in here and I've used a cell reference, what's kind of neat about this is I can just fill it down. And then if I take a look, it's still looking at operator and time, and now it's looking at the value in J4, which is a 2. Okay, so every time it hits a 2, it's adding in those values for time that are associated with the 2. And when I copied it down here, now it's looking at J5, which has a 3. So it's basically doing the same thing for 3 and then for 4. So that takes care of the sum if. And now we're going to take a look at the average if. So the average if is pretty much identical to the sum if. The only difference is we're using average instead of sum. So actually, I could copy and paste this and then make the little adjustment here. Press escape and change this to average if. And change this back to J3. And now it has averaged the time. But I am going to show you the long method for this. So to do the long method, we're going to go into Functions, Statistical, and we're going to choose average if. Now you'll see this is set up almost identical to this as the sum if. Okay, the only difference is the actual statistic that it's doing. So our criteria is still going to be the ID. Okay, our range is still going to be operator, hopefully spelled correctly. And then what we're going to average is our time. And we'll click OK. And we can actually fill that down just like we filled total time in. And I'm going to format these to display 2 decimals. That was one of the requirements. Okay, so now we've got the sum if and we have the average if filled in. Okay, so just in case you're not sure about the HLOOKUP, because I think that's one of the more tricky functions that we work with, we're going to key in HLOOKUP. And the lookup value is the operator ID. We have that range named as operator, comma. And then the table I called op table. And the value we need to retrieve for this one is the last name. So the operators are in row 1, last name is in row 2. And then we want an exact match. Let me make sure. Yep, false is going to give us an exact match on that. So I'm going to press enter. And then for first name, it's going to be very similar. It's equal HLOOKUP. And the lookup value is operator. And we're looking that up in the operator table. And now we need to retrieve first name. So we've got the operators in row 1, last name in row 2, first name is in row 3. And we need an exact match. And once we've got that, we can go ahead and fill these down.